Welcome to the Logosphere. This is Chris Stites, here as always with JD Roof.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
It's a beautiful night in Southern California.
It is.
Yeah.
The weather is fantastic. Nice warm breeze.
That's why we pay the big bucks out here.
The beginning of February.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we're enjoying our nice new studio.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We got our cool light bulbs behind us.
Mm-hmm.
We've been working at this for a while, for what, 6 months?
Yeah. And it's finally getting on its feet.
We're just getting the first gear in, I feel like. And I think the reason we wanted to do this show was kind of an introduction. Why is this thing called the Logosphere? It's a philosophical term that actually comes from a Russian philosopher who I'm not even going to try to butcher his name. But he was a radical Marxist that we didn't know that when we picked the name. But our definition of Logosphere is different, though. I feel like it's more...
Well, we kind of came to the term on our own.
Yeah.
And then we're pleasantly surprised to realize that
it's a real thing.
It is a term.
It is a term. And it's a philosophical term, which is interesting. A very, very complicated term.
And I think as far as I'm concerned, at least, as we've been searching for a name for this enterprise, the Logosphere is one that I've shied away from a little bit.
Well, when you get somebody to come up to you, and you told me this, when you get somebody to come up to you and they go, "Hey, what's your new podcast or your new YouTube show?" You're like, the Logosphere.
Yeah, in part because it's a term that isn't just, it's not just known, so it deserves a little explanation. So the thought behind this episode is that we could, talk about
our logo.
What our explanation for is it?
Yeah.
For it is.
I mean, I guess it could be a tongue tire, but yeah. So the logos is an ancient Greek word, right? And that's kind of what drew us towards it. And I mean, the first time I really understood or heard somebody say that in a conversation was, I think, Jordan Peterson, actually. And he talked about the logos and this other concept that's kind of behind that that's kind of seated behind that concept. And it's the idea of the golden thread of civilization, right? So
what does that mean?
Well, I'll let you.
No, I'm curious, which I don't really understand what the golden thread of civilization is or how it ties in. What's your understanding of it?
It's just that when you're participating in the logos or the word, right? That it's the way he described, or the way a couple people describe it, it's not just Jordan Peterson, but it's this idea of like you're having a dialogue with somebody. There's different versions of it, like it gets real complicated, but like I trust you and you trust me, even if we disagree on a particular topic and we kind of think together, but you have to have trust first. Like you got to have open and honest dialogue. And you got to be kind of committed to logic and reason, right? Like you're not going to, hopefully this doesn't go over everybody's head, but like fallacies, like, like red herring or straw man or any of that crap where you're character assassinating somebody, kind of like this cancel culture crap, like
not just trying to be the victor, but you're wrestling with someone, but you're doing it for a common purpose.
Yeah, and then there's a couple people that we've listened to and we like that track that back to hunting. Like which
goes back to what our initial idea for a podcast name was, which was Tracking a Mammoth.
Tracking a Mammoth, and we were saying the first forms of communication that humans kind of created communication for. It's not just like sex and sexual selection. It's also we have to hunt to get food or gather food. And there's a gnarly environment out there where we basically have just meat on our bones and we need to band together and talk and communicate and go hunt in the woods. And speech kind of, it's a theory, but speech kind of evolved from that, right? And it got more and more complicated. And that's kind of my understanding is that when we're talking, going back and forth, whether it's three people or me and you or two people, it's even in a classroom, I feel like kind of gets you there. a well oriented classroom. I think that's important too. Like there's got to be trust. There can't be corrosion or whatever that, like nothing can be forced or abrasive.
Coercion.
Coercion, yeah, and it's got to be open dialogue, and there's got to be freedom. Kind of this freedom of speech thing is kind of in the background as well, and there's got to be the ability for somebody to be wrong, right? And just there's a lot of like but once you get there, it's almost like my mind and your mind kind of we kind of start wrestling together, and we start like you throw out some premises and some ideas, and then I go, oh, that triggered something, and then I throw out some premises and ideas, and then that triggers something off of you, and then you come back, and then, oh, wait a minute, that idea didn't sound right. I liked what you said, and it's just this back and forth, and we almost like create almost like a super mind. It's like two minds together creating a super mind, and it's a really cool way of thinking. Instead of just being out alone, meditating or thinking about a problem or trying to write out a philosophical argument, or an essay or a thesis paper or doctor, whatever it is.
Sort of being engaged in an active, emergent experience.
Right. And it's emerging. It's like you're right at the tip, and one person goes here and then the other person goes here and then goes there. And then, it's like piggybacking off each other.
And I like that hunting instinct analogy, because it's, I've never really hunted actually. But I imagine, prehistoric people, who are really needing a hunt to make it through the winter.
Right.
It's make or break.
Right.
And one person says, I think I hear some leaves rustling out that way.
Yeah.
And the other one says, no, you're hearing it wrong. It's actually over that way.
Right.
Well, let's take a few steps forward and find out.
Yeah. Oh, let's flank this thing.
Yeah.
Like you go over around here, you go over here, and we'll yeah. It's cool. What's your idea of the golden thread of civilization, logosphere, logos? I mean, I guess ethos too is another term that kind of relates to this, but logo, we'll keep it to our yeah.
I actually I wrote my own attempt at a definition of logosphere as I understand it.
Was I close?
Yeah, I think we're both on the
on the same page.
Track.
Wow, this is gonna be fascinating. If
what I wrote was the dimension of meaning made manifest by truth and word.
So you gave it kind of like a philosophical like breakdown, really.
Yeah, I tried to address the different parts of it. The sphere is sort of the dimension.
Yeah, that we live in.
Yeah,
and that we talk in. It's interesting that you wrote that down, because the guy who invented it, the Russian philosopher, which we'll come back with his name maybe on another episode, but there was somebody that critiqued his critique or something, right? And it's kind of complicated, but there was one of these philosophers that said that it was the fact that radio was invented, just radio in general, and that people could freely listen and communicate to each other. Kind of like what we're doing now. I mean, but back then you couldn't really do it like we are doing it now, right? But just the fact that that's happening, it's like this emerging world of dialogue and art and everything, right? And that's the logosphere.
Yeah, I think in there that nods to the golden thread of civilization. You know, what is civilization? I think humans are sort of unique in the extent of our civilization and the sophistication of our civilization. Yeah. And how has it come about? How is it that 10,000 years ago things looked quite different than they do today? And you could argue that everything's gone to hell in a handbasket, but you would be also naive to not look at how miraculous, this enterprise has been. Right. And how did it come about? And, it was, the other thing that makes us distinct is the extent that we use language, and how does that language and what's happening with language tie into, where we're going. But that logosphere, that idea of the mammoth deep in the woods that's, that we're out hunting, it's like, where's that mammoth? What is that mammoth? Where's it coming from? There's something revelatory about it, because we're just going into the woods together. And what are we looking for? Where's it coming from? Yeah. And it's unknown. Mm-hmm. It's the edge of knowing. It kind of reminds me of
some like this idea of reality. I think this is Heidegger, but I barely can understand this guy. I mean, it's crazy, but it's like this flashlight in the dark, right? So like we're the light, and this is what we can see, but there's so much more happening in this room or this forest that you're shining the flashlight, and you just move it ever so slightly, right? And you can do this alone, right? And you'll stumble over stuff, you're gonna miss things, but that's all you're only able to see that much. So it's like so this is a better way to frame it for our purposes. I have my flashlight, right? My eyes, my senses of the world. You have yours. So if we combine them together and we trust each other, and we have an open dialogue that's fair and honest and intellectually honest, or intellectually consistent, then we have a bigger flashlight, right? We have a bigger beam and we can see more of the forest, or we can see things that maybe we never could have seen before on our own. Because I think also, I like going alone into the forest because if you know, like I love watching those survival shows, and those are real popular, right? Everybody thinks they need to escape to the forest and just, go fucking kumbaya in the fucking forest, and it'll heal all their wounds. But the problem when you go out into the forest and you try to hunt for real, and you're sleeping on the dirt, and you're trying to make a fire, and you're trying to find food. If you didn't bring food in with you, you start losing your mind. If you know what I mean, like
I'm actually currently watching Alone.
Oh, I love Alone.
So
it's amazing.
I'm on the final episode of whatever season I'm on, and I watched 20 minutes of it before you called me over. But it's been, that idea that there's something beautiful and miraculous and inspiring about nature, but very hostile, and you realize how, without this civilization that we've, threaded together with gold, how just, how vulnerable we are. Some of the, most qualified experts in the world trying to make it 100 days in the Arctic, and halfway through, 3 of them are left,
Right.
And people are tapping out on the first week because how easily something can go wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I watched there's an interview with Joe Rogan and the guy that shot the moose with his arrow. And then he was talking about the Wolverines trying to steal his food, and he won. He ended up winning, right? He's a bad motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like, this dude was so cool. He's such an interesting person. But the thing that happens though, if you watch that show, I'm sure you picked up on this, is the people start reverting back to like an animal-like way, right? The communication goes down. Like, obviously, there's no communication, right? And you get dirtier, and like you start kind of grunting more, and like you almost become an animal. Like
we are an animal.
We are an animal, but
some of that,
right? But that like kind of like, I don't know, that instinct comes out, and you're not really, like I think of Captain Fantastic, which is a great movie. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's this idea of taking your family off the grid, right? These 2 lawyers that are really smart, they buy this huge plot of land, and they just literally live on the land with their kids, and they like teach them how to hunt and like all this spiritual. It's a beautiful movie, but the problem is the older son doesn't know how to he's not socialized. He doesn't, the world, this big world with cities and stuff is still there, in towns, and like you want to be able to live in it, right? And he like has got to figure it out, but he's way late, and so at the end of the movie, they kind of come to a happy medium. Like the dad goes, you know what, I'm going to buy this like country house. We're going to live in a house. We're not going to live in the dirt in a tent. So it's like he finds like, okay, we're going to take a little bit of this nature, thing with my kids, and like this organic kind of lifestyle. But we're also going to be adaptable to the urban kind of, going to school, doing all that socialization with the kids. And it's kind of like this happy, it's almost like the thesis, antithesis, and the synthesis, right? It's like that.
Aren't we all in our own way trapped between that same rock and hard place, right?
Right.
Our connection to nature and our reliance on culture.
Right.
And how if we don't have at least part of one foot in each dimension, it can become a very unhappy place, right? If we're all in culture, then we are, we are indoctrinated.
Well, you read the book Into the Wild, right?
I did.
Yeah. So, what was his end thought, right? Like, is that true in the movie where he realized he dies? Whoever that kid's name was, you can go
Chris
on.
McCandless.
But I'm asking you this: did he realize that happiness is better when it's shared?
That's a Tolstoy quote that they really highlighted to, I think, at least try to, put a bow on the movie and the book.
Oh, okay. Was that real?
Yeah.
He wrote that down?
I believe so. I mean, there was a notebook that was the final evidence they found of his, his experience there, and there were some quotes. There was very shorthand notes that were left, and that was one of them. Either it was highlighted or it was copied down, but that was definitely one of them. Now I'm recalling. And so his story is interesting to us because, he went totally off the grid.
Yeah.
He had an inheritance that he gave completely to charity. He left his car in the middle of the desert, and he just tried to survive, and he tried to detach as much as he could from society because he had a very, that's the thing is, was it that he loved nature or was it that he abhorred society? Was it born from resentment or was it born from a call to adventure? And I think that it was maybe a little bit of both. And so I think when people read that or watch that, they try to decide whether Chris McCandless was someone to be admired, who was doing something brave and worthwhile, or if he was a fool who was naive and jaded because of his upbringing, and he was, middle finger in the air, wandering out to a very easily avoidable death. And in the book, at least, it's John Krakauer. He tries to let the reader make their own interpretation.
He's a good writer.
He is.
Yeah. It's funny because when you're saying that, something popped in my head that the idea of dialogue, open and honest dialogue, would probably curb a radical move like that, right? Like if you can feel like you're connected with somebody in society, like they really get you, and like you have a friend and you have a companion. It doesn't have to be a lover or an intimate lover, like a band of brothers, a band of sisters, whatever. But if you have that, you're not going to want to detach from that, right? So it's almost like the logosphere or having this dialogue back and forth, this open and honest dialogue, is kind of the solution in a weird way to going either to social construction, like you're just drinking the Kool-Aid, you're buying all the new stuff that you think society like will make you look cool, and you got the right car and the Tesla and all this shit. Or and you get all like suburban, like you're just in the culture, everything, all the pop bands and
Totally
all this totally bought in, totally hook, line, and sinker. This is my life. This is my higher power, right? Or you go, no, I'm going to go butt naked in the woods and die from eating berries that I mislabeled, like those seem like they're extreme because we are, to me, we are social creatures, right? And we're kind of open towards each other. Like our faces face each other, our fucking privates face each other. Like we're kind of, we're supposed to get, in there, dog. And you don't want to completely detach from that, right? Like I wouldn't call him a fool. He's definitely an idealist. He's definitely, an ideologue probably. I would imagine that social construction theorists kind of gone wrong, maybe a little. Maybe not wrong, but just to the extreme.
There's something to be admired because I think we all recognize how dependent we are and also constrained by, the society that we live in.
Yeah.
Right?
But you just said constrained. And, constrained, if we don't have constraints, we have too much freedom. That's a whole other...
And we're all hungry for freedom because we don't want... we don't want to be oppressed and exploited and taken advantage of.
Yeah.
But we learn that freedom comes at a cost.
Yeah. So, anyway, I'm actually impressed that both our definitions are very, because we didn't plan that out. Like we didn't I looked into that Russian dude, the Russian philosopher. His name starts with an M, and he was a critique of Dostoevsky, and I was like, man, this is like too complicated right now for me to really like. It's like something you have to read, and the article or the thesis or whatever he wrote. It was a series of essays he wrote are all on JSTOR, so you have to be an active academic to get a hold of that stuff. So maybe hopefully I'll get a hold of it and we can dive into that maybe for fun.
I was thinking, so what is it that we're doing here?
I don't know, man. No. I think and this is another thing that maybe we should put in this. Chris and I met how many years ago?
Probably 8 or 9.
8 or 9 years ago. We're actually were we working at the same place?
Not when we first met.
When we first met, you were speaking in front of a group of anonymous individuals about an anonymous problem that you had, and I liked what you were baking. I was like, this guy has got it. Like, whoa! Like it turned me on. Right?
You walked in kind of late.
Yeah.
And I felt like a lot of people, I felt like that, what I felt compelled to say landed on a lot of deaf ears.
Yeah.
And yours wasn't one of them. And that sort of started our conversation.
Yeah. And I think I came up to you and I was like, dude, I'm like, are you, because for a second I thought you were a part of another group that I was a part of. And you weren't. It was like the weirdest thing because the way
I came to the rhetoric on my own.
Yeah, you kind of did. Right. And it was so strange because when you're used to hearing a certain dialogue about spiritual axioms, let's put our principles, right? And you hear a certain group of people, whether it's a religious community or whatever, and you're in that group. When you hear somebody on the outside, it's almost like a flag goes up, like, oh my, yeah, that guy understood. And I remember feeling that at the meeting. I was like, where did this come from?
The dog whistle, right?
It was the dog whistle or something.
Yeah.
And I just I was like, yeah, I complimented you, and then that was it, right?
Your experience is somewhat in line with my experience in a way that, it seems like a lot of us are very eager to not discuss, right? There's an element to your life that is similar to an element to my life,
right? Yeah. Yeah.
There's the mammoth there too, right?
Right. Because
I think we all recognize that even though we're not in the middle of the Arctic with winter coming, that our lives are still, we are still vulnerable. We are, even if we're not vulnerable to being eaten by a pack of wolves today, there's countless tragedies and failures and things that can and will go wrong at every turn. There is, the minds that we inhabit that are, even on our best days, are oftentimes sort of can be torture chambers because of the ways they're laid out and, our inabilities to wield them properly, and all the things that we get engaged in to try to produce something like a meaningful, happy life for ourselves, and falling short and falling on our face. And so the mammoth is sort of like that, someone that you can cooperate with to hopefully try to sort things out a little bit more, right?
Yeah, and have a design for living that won't. It won't. I guess it won't shield you from tragedy, but it gives you a way to get through tragedy. It gives you a meaning through tragedy, at least, like death and whatever it is. And yeah, I remember seeing that, and I was like, wow, that guy. And I think I recommended you should go to. Dude, your message is. Whoa, did I just say that? We could cut that out. All right, but I told you. So I'll take that over. You should go with the group that I'm part of, right? And then I didn't see you for like another year, right, or something.
Yeah, it's almost like you go into you were like I almost think about like Strider in Lord of the Rings, kind of like going into town, and there's all the townspeople, but then there's someone sitting in the corner. Yeah. And you go, you should, come with us.
Yeah, come with us.
There's danger there.
Yeah.
But we're after, we're going to Mordor.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's get down into the causes and conditions and let's just get down. Yeah, and let's really dissect what spirituality means, right? And rightly relate. Well, anyways, I won't get into that. But I met you again at work. We worked together. I mean, we didn't work in the same facility, but we worked for the same company. And you were a more senior agent there, and I was like a part-timer, floozy. And I saw you, and we kind of knew each other, and I was like, "Oh, what's up, man?" And I think didn't you ask me? You're like, "Yo, my head's kind of like I'm not feeling it," or something like that. Like you were.
I don't recall.
You seemed like How did you get to the group that we ended up going to?
Yeah, it was a series of unfortunate events,
Yeah.
and also breadcrumbs.
Yeah. I was one of the breadcrumbers.
You were one of the breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
And there were
And I think
several.
we talked about it again. I think that's what happened. We had, we were talking about, fundamental axioms to get behind, right? Fundamental, ways of life or ways of looking at life to improve our life, right? And you wanted a taste of what I was eating, basically. And I'm sure you got approached by other people that, and then you eventually went on your own, and bam, we got to know each other more because we'd see each other more often, every couple weeks or so. And
So do you think that's what we're after? Are we after untangling some of these, these confounding spiritual axioms, or are we just trying to get rich and famous by making a podcast?
I don't. Yeah, no. I honestly, I think the one thing that me and you really like to kind of play around with is the paradoxes, right, of existence, like weird paradoxes about life.
I think one of our name ideas was "Where's the line?"
Where's the line?
Because we would bring up these topics, and you realize that, if you go too far this way or too far that way,
Right.
But where's the line?
Right. Like we had a guest on that's already on our YouTube about the whole polyamory thing, which is the open relationship play parties, which, you could put in quotes, sex parties. And where's the line with that? Because the guest himself, and this is what Cal said, he wouldn't try to promote polyamory on the society because he knows it won't work. But he wants to be able to, incorporate.
Or did. And also came from, and referring to where's the line, he came from,
Right.
an upbringing that was about as polar opposite as you can get.
Right.
And, he's ultimately settled on neither. He's sort of bounced back and forth, trying to find the line in his own life, just like we all are.
Yeah, so topics like that is a perfect example of what we like to investigate. We like to talk about. I'm trying to think of other paradoxes that we've that we kind of laugh at. One simple paradox of addiction is to become because I'm a drug addict, right? And I've been recovered from drugs for many years, and so have you. But this impulse, so I drink a beer, and I'm speaking as an alcoholic. I drink a beer and I like the effect produced by, right? And my brain is telling me, yeah, that's good, because it is good. It feels good. It's great, right? Evolution is telling me this is good. This is, you want more. It's like more calories, more of that. And that idea gets perverted. So something that could be potentially good for me becomes the worst thing ever, and it takes over my life. And it's like a paradox. It's like the weirdest thing that you could do that with food. You can do that with a lot of stuff, right? And that's something that's a topic that I think me and you really like to kind of dig into for ourselves,
And it seems like we're all on this sort of endeavor to, I don't know, almost like recode our nature, right? Mm-hmm. The beer or the chocolate cake or Pornhub or whatever it is,
right?
Evolutionarily, we're very drawn to it, and it would be foolish. Evolution is obviously a much wiser mind than ours,
right?
It's got us this far. Why shouldn't we hang on and let it take us to the next, the next phase of our development,
right?
But we're sort of recognize that that we have to transcend ourselves to some degree, you know. And how do you transcend yourself?
Right.
You know, it's a quandary.
It's definitely a quandary.
Yeah.
And we're both, another thing that probably we should get out on the table is that we both believe in God, right? We believe in a higher power of some sort. And we wrestle with that idea every day, because there's certain times in the day where I'm like, nah, it doesn't exist, you know? And then most of the time now I believe in this power, this kind of monotheic power, you know, this one God, to rule them all, one ring to rule them all. And, so we want to investigate that, because there's a lot of paradoxes in that. Mm-hmm. Right? Like how do you believe in something that you can't touch, taste, smell, see, right? And we're very interested in the existential arguments and angst of the world. You know, we like a lot of the same authors. We try to read similar books or the same books. We've done we did the Immortality Key. I'm sure we'll do maybe a more refined episode about that. And I mean, that's kind of, that I think overall that's kind of what we're doing. We're investigating, we're hunting these ideas. We'll call them the Mammoth, but it's really ideas, maybe, it's more than that, but it's ideas. We want to hunt them down. We want to kind of, and the other thing that I think that we kind of played around with a couple of weeks ago that we liked was we'll take an argument, you be the bull, I be the bear. And we try to kind of, we tried to do it with the vaccine. It was kind of weak. But like you were like, I was anti-vax and you were pro-vax, and we tried to kind of see if it was constitutional to actually have vax mandates. And like, we kind of came to the middle of that really. But like things like abortion and stuff, I mean, I know that's a hot topic, but all these hot topics in the culture that are so like polarizing. Yeah.
So it seems obvious enough that to cooperate with someone else to help clarify the way that you move through the world and see the world is useful. But why film it? Why publish it?
Maybe it's an ego thing. Like we think we're cool enough to do that, and we think we have something to offer. I mean, I honestly think that the dialogue that me and you talk about when it comes to God, getting sober off of drugs and alcohol, existential angst, whatever the topic is, whatever the metaphysics, whatever. I believe that more people need to hear this. I really do, because one of my biggest inspirations was Jordan Peterson. I went to go see him in person a couple years ago when he was doing that gnarly tour. And I was like a junior in college studying philosophy, and one of these kids in my class said, "Hey, have you heard of this alt-right guy named Jordan Peterson?" And I'm like, "Oh, I saw a thing in my town. He's coming to speak." And he's like, "Yeah, he's alt-right." And I was like, "Okay." So I watched a video of him. I'm like, that guy doesn't seem like he's an alt-right guy, right? Like he seems kind of like he's like a lefty kind of psychologist, right? And I didn't know the whole thing with the transgender stuff. I didn't know any of that, but I kind of was starting to kind of learn it. And so I got a ticket, and I got the nosebleeds, and I went and saw him speak. And I was like, wow. I mean, you could hear a fucking dime drop there. And he was making so much sense. And even the stuff that he was talking about with the lobster and the hierarchies and all that stuff was so controversial. It wasn't just his people really were trying to eat him for lunch.
Yes, one of the things that's interesting about him is when he speaks like that publicly, he thinks out loud.
Yeah.
And he invites everyone who's there to go along with him. And is he doing it because he wants to sell more books? Maybe in part. But also I imagine that he is able to arrive at new places than he would if he was just doing that in his own head, in his own house, right? Mm-hmm. There's that logosphere, there's that shared cognition idea that even you and I talking is one thing, but the camera and the microphone and the internet connection, it changes the way we think, maybe for better, maybe for worse. But, we are in some ways plugging in to an audience, potentially. right?
Right.
So whether it's a amphitheater or whether it's, the metaverse.
Or some guy jerking off in his basement.
Yeah. Ideally, that's our target audience. Yeah. Then, maybe it will bring us into new hunting territory.
Yeah.
Where there's bigger game to catch. And God knows we need the biggest game we can because, the winter is cold and the winter is long.
Yeah, we need to eat. Everybody needs to eat. Yeah. So, I think that's a good way of framing what we're after. I mean, it's so funny because me and you, we like to go abstract. We do. We'll go a couple levels out, and then we'll try to come back in. And I mean, this hasn't been that complicated, but it's just having a conversation about the name of our show is like funny to me. It's like it's comical, but I think it's necessary because and in the backstory with me and you, I think on our next couple of runs, we're going to have another guest who's a clinical psychologist, and a really good one.
You're not biased, though.
I'm not biased. It's just my wife. But so we're going to have her on, and then we're going to do kind of. I mean, I guess you could call it like a trauma series, like overcoming trauma or whatever you want to talk. Like, we're going to go into. Chris had a really, really crazy tragedy that happened to him, 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago?
Yeah, a year and a half ago.
Year and a half ago. His dad died from cancer. I had a thing happen to me when I was 19 where I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, a juvenile type 1 diabetes, and it killed me. I mean, I was suicidal, and Chris was the same thing. And I mean, I'm speaking for you, but...
I was.
You were, yeah. And so we want to... Because Chris and I are so used to sharing our experience, strength, and hope. We have like these package shares that we can do at the drop of a dime. We can. We can go and go to a podium in front of a bunch of people, and for bad or for worse, but I can go through a story and it's kind of polished because I've done it for so many years. This is what I did when I was a kid. This is how I got hooked on drugs. And you know what I mean? And I go through the whole fucking thing, and the things that we're kind of interested in are the real, like the debating society stuff, the tragedy, the real gnarly stuff, and we want to kind of give a backstory of those tragedies, I think, and like what can we get? And I think the challenge is if we can make each other cry.
Yeah, see who can make the other cry. That's the victor. I don't know what the prize is.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Just the satisfaction.
Just the satisfaction. Yeah. I don't think we'll ever. Have a.
It should be satisfying.
It should be. I mean, mine's so far removed. I'm just going to call it now. I probably won't cry. Yeah. But you, I could get you. It's possible. I mean, because yours is still really fresh. Yeah. So I mean, I have the advantage.
You do, and that's the way it'll be that much more satisfying when I win.
You won't. Unless my blood sugar, because I wear like an insulin pump and all this stuff.
That's how we should make the story more authentic. We should like facilitate a blood sugar like emergency. So you're in sort of a half diabetic
coma. And then it's like, okay, here's the cameras. Let's go. Yeah, I was thinking about that. Like how do you capture that? How do you like, because when my blood sugars go low or high, I lose my mind. Mm-hmm. Like I really like, and the longer I've had this disease, it's kind of, it's funny, but it's actually like bad, but I can't think right. And I'll start sweating profusely, and like I just get all confused. It's like I'm an old man with Alzheimer's. And I mean, I've had roommates find me like naked in the corner, like screaming at things that are not there, and completely sober, it's just my blood sugar's at a 15, and I'm just, I think aliens are after me, and that would be pretty.
That would make a good episode.
That would make a good episode. Yeah. And then high, I get real mad.
Yeah.
So like that wouldn't be a good episode because I'm just.
Might be a great episode.
And another thing too is like, now that we're putting these episodes on YouTube, people can make comments, and we will read them because we're nobodies, right?
You'll be the only comments. We have plenty of time to read it.
Yeah. So please like and subscribe to our channel, and leave comments, because what are interesting paradoxes in the world? What are interesting topics that people want we're not trained like polished philosophers by any means. We both were philosophy students, so that counts for something. But we're kind of also, another thing that we didn't put into our explanation of the name is we're kind of run-amucks that really catch on to these ideas, right? Like, it might take me a while to understand a Nietzsche book, but I will understand it eventually, right? Like, it's like the layman trying to be the intellect. And I think you might have a little bit more on me as far as critical thinking, because the way your brain works, like, and people will know that as we break things down. You have a way of kind of like, you put a gear in and you're able to kind of boom, 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 and hit each premise and like get down to a conclusion and then go back. You know what I mean? And I can kind of do that, but I'm not as good because I get like distracted and I try to be funny and shit. So we have different personalities, right? And but we want to kind of analyze like the layman. It's like the layman's philosophy in a weird way, right? Like,
Maybe we should change the name.
The layman's philosophy. No, Logosphere is the one. I'm proud of Logosphere. I think Logosphere is a cool name. It really is.
So am I.
And maybe we'll make T-shirts, and we'll do all that stuff. So, you got anything else to add, or do you want to?
I don't. It's a great place to end.
All right. Hopefully that made sense. And like I said, like and subscribe and leave comments, and we'll be back with our next episode. All right.